guess it was probably summer of '49 when I had got that Indian motorcycle, and I was chasing most of the summer with it. But one of the things that happened was that most of the guys with motorcycles lived down in northeast Minneapolis and hung out down by Ron Clair's cafe, which was next door to Ordeman's roller rink. And roller skating was the big deal for young boys and girls, and so that was a popular meeting place, and so we would hang out down in that area. And one of the things that happened was that the Ronnie Cornelius, Mary's husband, was running Ron Clair's, and a lot of the boys would be in for hamburgers and whatnot. And anyway, big time Ronnie is gotta talk whatever you're talking, and so he's talking motorcycles with the guys, and so somewhere along the line he inferred to him that he could ride a motorcycle. Well, then, unbeknownst to me, he starts to big deal me to see if I would let him ride around the block with a motorcycle and give Wayne a ride or whatever. Well, I didn't really know. I mean, little Wayne riding wasn't anything that I wanted him to do, but anyway, he finally talked me into letting him ride the motorcycle around the block. Well, after he rode it around a few times, he got kind of throttle happy, and he got confused as to what was the clutch and what was the brakes. And when he come ripping down the street and heading for 37th, and he lost it and hit the curb and went flying over into the vacant lot. And so I guess he didn't get hurt too bad, but he sure bent the front fork on that Indian motorcycle. So we had to haul it into the Indian shop over in St. Paul, and so it took I guess it took about 2 weeks before they had the parts and put it all back together again and got it all painted up looking like new again. And so anyway, that was an incident. Incidentally, he probably wouldn't have had so much trouble, but he in order to do these things, he had to have a few drinks, and most of the time he'd end up with a few too many drinks, and so it was kind of kind of rough to deal with. He was well, you know him to this day. He could be just as good-hearted and friendly, and great guy. And but when he got drinking, he could pull off darndest crap, and so it was a case where we had to live with it because Mary had to live with it. And anyway, it was pretty rough going in those years, and he ended up instead of bragging about running a motorcycle, he had to defend himself on piling one up for the case of the kid on 33rd and Central, well, he actually lived on 33rd and Tyler. But anyway, he had this beautiful big red Harley Davidson, big old hog that was really pretty, and so it ended up we ended up at a swimming party out at Lake Martin, I guess it was, and I rode with him in his car, and so he ends up telling me that he'd like to swap motorcycles with me, and so the deal was that he had this new Harley motorcycle that he'd bought from Egeberg Cycle, and it had been Roy Egeberg's personal machine that year, and it was still like new, and so anyway, he couldn't afford the payments on it, and so it was a case where he would trade me machines if I'd take over his payments, and so that was another case where that's just what I did. It was illegal to do it that way, but once he signed it over to me, and it was a case where I just made the payments out of his book for him, and I don't remember what was left, but it was the machine was like probably $1,300 for the machine, and he had it paid down to about somewhere around $700, I think it was, and so I ended up with that big red Harley, and so boy, I was king of the hill with that thing. One of the first things that happened was I went tooling out to the hangout out at they call it Goody's place. A guy by the name of Goodwin had a 3-2 joint dance hall deal out in Spring Lake Park, right on the highway there, and it was the hangout for the young crowd. And anyway, when it was probably a Saturday night, I pulled in out there, and I ended up meeting Chris Hamron and George Timmerman. I don't know exactly how, but somehow anyway we were together at a table, and the story was that this other guy from northeast Minneapolis, Lowry, out by where Timmerman lived, had the fastest Harley in town, and so the case where between Ham and George, they drummed up a race, and so at the case where about I don't know, I guess it was only 4 of us that there was supposed to be fast machines, and so anyway, I ended up taking off. It was a drag race out right on the highway, right out in front of the joint. Of course, those days there wasn't much traffic around. The people very much. And so anyway, we took off, and I wiped them all out real good with that machine of mine. That just beat them real cold. So that made a lifelong friend of Timmerman and Hamron. They had to hang with me because I had the fastest machine in town now, and so it was a case where we incidentally Timmerman had a big Harley too, and Hamron would always ride with him. Hamron was his old man was a math teacher down at Edison, and he was so tight that he wouldn't even let Chris spend his savings. And Chris had enough money to buy a brand new motorcycle, but the old man wouldn't let him. And so Chris was always trying to get us to talk him into letting them buy one, but he wouldn't budge. So Chris was always riding with us, and they lived next door to each other over on Logan up in the north. I guess it was about 35th and Logan, something like that. And so anyway, we had a lot of good times together, and did a lot of chasing, and then I don't know, probably one of the luckier things that happened was that they talked me into, Timmerman talked both Hamron and I into joining the Air National Guard with him that was located out at New Brighton and at the Arsenal, right using those government buildings out there. And so I finally decided that I knew that the draft was breathing down my neck sooner or later, because all the guys were being drafted into the Army. And so I went out with them, and that was on a Sunday, I think it was. And anyway, I joined up right then and there, and the old commanding officer and everybody around seemed to be real nice people, and quite a gang, and Tim had always told about the good times they had, even though it was a Army routine, and at that time it was part of the Army. It was still the Army Air Force, and so anyway, they swore me in that day, and wouldn't you know, Monday morning or Monday, in the mail was the draft notice for me to show up down at Minneapolis Armory for induction into the Army. And so I thought, well, hell, I'm already in the Air Force. I can forget that. Well, that was a mistake. When I didn't show up down there, they gave me a phone call, and they said either you show up in the morning at 8 o'clock, or you're going to be pulled in for immediate induction and by the military police. Well, so I went down, and I had to go through the whole routine, a whole days, or maybe it was 2 days, I'm not sure, but anyway, it's physical examination, paperwork, and more paperwork, tests and more tests, and I think it was from early in the morning till late in the evening, then till I got out of there, but eventually the and I notified the Air National Guard, and so eventually they got the word over so that I didn't have to worry about the Army anymore. And so it was a case where I avoided the Army, but then I was in the Air National Guard, which was in the transition of moving from the Army Air National Guard to the plain Air Force National Guard, and which would make no difference whatsoever, except that here I'd been issued all these Army uniforms. And when soon after that, when we were activated, then I had to buy my own new uniforms again, because they changed to the blues from the olive drabs, and so I wasn't very happy about that, and neither were most of the other guys, but. Anyway, we got activated, and after we had training and indoctrination and all that going on out there at the Air Guard Station, the 585th, I guess it was. And we had our equipment and everything out there in New Brighton and at that arsenal, and those long buildings and that they were shooting ranges where we would test rifle shooting, and then of course there was miles of roads and whatnot around there for our what they call basic training, which meant you learn how to march, and then like I said, a lot of indoctrination stuff. The indoctrination was brainwashing. They started brainwashing us on the situation around the world, and the big deal was about Laos. They didn't mention Vietnam hardly at all. Everything was Laos, and as it turned out later, I figured out that they had our military had a lot of their CIA operatives running the Montagnard tribes people, which were nicknamed Mongs. They were supposedly the fierce fighting force. These mountain people were the only ones that would fight, while the ordinary peasant farmers they couldn't care less about fighting, but the mountain people, they'd kill their own people, I guess, so it didn't make any difference to them, and so we had to they were clothing and giving them guns and ammunition and making soldiers out of them, and so that we could fight the communists. But anyhow, that as they were talking about those, this was at the time when the North Koreans took off invading South Korea, and so our bit turned out to be the Korean War. And so while they were worried about the French being kicked out of the northern Vietnam, the North Koreans were going to take over South Korea, and so as it turned out, the Russians were ones that they were also scared of, and so our endeavor was mostly radar, and so our squadron was ordered to go to our northern Midwest and northern radar sites, and so they had a number of them, around Little Falls at Wadena, and some south down around Missouri and so forth. Well, Cameron got sent to Missouri, and Timmerman got sent. He got sent to Korea, and I was sent to Findlay, North Dakota, and so that's where we had to go. And Findlay, North Dakota was a case where there was a brand new site. They hadn't even finished it when we got there, and so we had to put up with barracks that were not quite completed, and matter of fact, the whole base was still being worked on by local construction engineers, and the matter of fact, I got in on learning how to run a big D6 diesel Caterpillar. Part of the construction was building the sewer drain field for the camp, and that drain field was probably the size of a football field, and so a number of us guys got extra pay from this big outfit that was doing the sewer engineering and construction, and so anyway, I was told by the guy that was running this construction outfit that if I wanted a job when I got out of the service to come and see him, I could go. He liked my ability to operate that cat, and so that was kind of neat. But one of the things that also happened up there right off the bat is the barracks had washing machines and dryers that the guys really didn't know too much how to use, and really what was happening is the old story, if a little bit is good, the whole lot must be better. So when they went to wash their clothes, instead of a cup of soap, they put in 2 cups of soap maybe, or whatever, and so the next thing you know, those wash machines were bubbling over with suds from every direction, and the suds water got into the timers, and some of the other solenoids, and would short them out, and the next thing you know, the wash machine wouldn't work. And so of course me, if it's not working, I got to fix it. And already broke. I can't hurt it any. Anyway, I had my toolbox with me, and so I started fixing those machines. And just because it was, if I'm going to wash my clothes, I got to fix the damn washing machine. Well, it wasn't long, and the old man found out about it, and that was really super. He thought I was able to help him out with those machines, and so one of the things that we had to do was deliver some kind of I don't remember what the heck it was. I think it probably was only paperwork. I'm not sure what was in those boxes, but anyway, we had to haul something up to Minot, where they have an air base up there. They're not just the full squadron up there, but they also had a radar site at Minot too. So anyway, the old man decided that I should be part of that trip going up there. Chandler and I were going to run this truck, 6x6 Jimmy truck, and then one of the officers and one of the clerk typists or some guy like that were going to go up in the sedan in an officer's car. Well, anyway, we did. We drove up there. It was a couple 100 miles or so to get to Minot, and at Minot, that's a place on hills up there, northwestern North Dakota, where the wind never stops blowing, and so we went up there, and of course we had to stay overnight at the camp there, and but that was a good time to go into town and raise hell at the one of the beer joints, sort of a beer joint dance hall deal, where like I say, we raised hell, and then next day we had to drive home, and so but it was kind of crazy, because by the time we got home, we barely made it. We had to stop on the way and tighten the lugs on one of the back wheels that was starting to sling grease and so forth, and the axle was loosening, and unbeknownst to me, the other mechanic in the motor pool had pulled those rear wheels on that, or at least one of those wheels on that Jimmy a week or two before to check the brakes or something, and as it turned out, when he put it back together again, he didn't ram those bearings snug to really get the races and everything locked in proper, where you really lock them up and then you back them off and adjust them. Well, he hadn't done that good enough, so that it left them sloppy. So when those big duals weren't locked up there snug, they were the axle that also is locked into those hubs was put on extreme pressure, and it ended up just about shearing the bolts off, and so we were lucky to make it back anyway. But it was a kind of a special trip, and we were treated really good. Of course, one of the times I got in a little trouble was when they asked me if I'd build a road around the fence line. They had to patrol the fence line, and they wanted to be able to use the pickup trucks, and the terrain was a little rough in some places, and so they wanted me to grade it around there right close to the fence to accommodate the trucks. And so at the time that we got that started was I think it was in the afternoon, getting kind of late. But anyway, I was on that. I had to go real slow because I was shaving that fence line, and they didn't want me to rip the fence out, but kill all the weeds next to it and all that. But so. It was really taking a long time going around the whole base with that cat, and so I see when I get up to the roadway, and which was just a block away from the motor pool where the cat was be parked, and so. Instead of going all the way back around that mile or so of fence, I decided that I take a shortcut across the newly paved road that I was supposed to stay off from. And all I had to do, though, is just cross that road without turning and get the right angle, and maybe I could make it without making any marks. Well, I did a pretty good job, but I still left a little bit of marks, and sure as hell the old man see those marks on the road, and so the next thing you know, Kuss is scheduled for KP in the morning, and so I had to show up for KP in the morning, but I was only there for a couple hours, and the old man came through the line, and he says, "Hey," he says, "was that you that crossed the road with that cat?" "Yep, yes, sir." "Well, I don't know how you managed to get it to do such little damage, but you shouldn't have done that. But they need you over at the motor pool, so go on over there." So that was the extent of that, and I was on such good terms with him that another time when he was on he had to go on a flight to get in his flight time, and he had to fly out of well, at times he'd fly out of Fargo, but most of the time he'd fly out of the cities. They'd have their planes they used, and so anyway, he was going down, and he wanted to know if I would be interested in a 3-day pass to the cities and ride down with him. So I did, and he was he was a young guy, probably 35 years old, but he was commanding officer of our radar site, and so anyway, he was a good things pretty easy up there for me. I had the run of the whole place, and most all the guys had not all of them, but about half of them. Not half. There were about 10 or 12 guys that had cars, and of course everybody that had a car up there, a mechanic, they were real friendly together, and so I was a good friend to almost everybody that had a car, and everybody that had a car, everybody else tried to ride with them. So I had practically no enemies on the whole place. I guess there was a couple of guys that I wasn't too friendly with, but for the most part, the whole gang was mostly my friend. Actually, in the old days, those old cars, one of the common things was connecting rod bearings. It was just so common for flatted crankshafts, loose bearings, and so forth. And of course, most of it was because without full flow oil filters and the detergent oils and that kept things clean, the lead deposits from the gasoline would end up in the crankcase, and they'd end up going through the oil pump and end up trying to feed through the bearings. And of course, when you start feeding grit into a bearing, it would chew the babbitt and chew the bearing surface on the crankshaft, and so pretty soon you got a loose bearing. Then it gets looser and looser and starts to rattle and bang, and it flattens the crankshaft before you ever get. Sometimes it even blows the engine apart. But and it was. It seemed like the Chrysler products had more trouble than most of the rest of them. And this one particular car that was on the base was owned by one of the airmen that he was a party goer, and Saturday night drunk, you might call him. But anyway, he bought this 37 Plymouth Coupe that was a doll of a car, but in the process of his Saturday night binge, he come back with it. Well, they had to haul it in. They come dragging the thing in, and so he wanted to know if I would could fix that thing. And I started it up, and boy, they just go pound, knock, really, really something fierce. And so I, told him that. Said, well, I'll have a look at it and see what I can do. And I pulled the pan off, and found the flopping connecting rod, and that crankshaft was so chewed. And so I told him that I said, I'll see if I can get the thing to running for you. But I can't promise you anything. And so, well, do what you can. And so I come up with an idea that turned out to be really fabulous. I took the old inserts out of that connecting rod, and I wrapped emery cloth on them, and then put them back in with just the dry emery cloth, and put it together, and snugged it up till I almost locked the crankshaft. So it was snugged up real tight. And then I would hit the starter and start the engine and shut it off. And then I go down and I tighten that emery cloth up again, and I start it up and shut it off. Just the engine just rev up and down, And I kept that up kept changing the emery cloth, and I kept that up until I got that crankshaft smooth. It was it was almost like grinding the crankshaft. And so anyway, I got the crankshaft smooth, and then I went into town and bought an undersized bearing by like 20 thousandths under or something, whatever. They sold them in increments of usually 1, 2, or 3 thousandths under, or 10, 20, or 30 thousandths under. 30 thousandths was about the max you get undersized on a bearing. And I don't remember what I got, but if I got a 30 thousandths under, whatever it was a case where when I put it, fit it was still a little bit loose from the grinding. Anyway, I made some shim out of thin metal. I might even had a roll of shim stock with me. But anyway, I fitted metal underneath those bearing inserts to where I got it almost locked up. Almost too tight. So then I'd back one shim out to leave clearance, and then I put that thing together and got oil in it, and it ran and sounded just nice as could be again. And I told them, hey, anything over 40 miles an hour, it's suicide. And so, if you drive it, just drive it, you got an engine again. And I don't remember how much I charged the guy for it, but it was probably something around $40. So anyway, he paid me, and then I forget what happened. I didn't see I went on leave or something, and I was gone for I might have been gone for a month. And you get 30 days leave every year in the service. So anyway, when I got back, I asked him how the car was going, and running great. And great, that's good. And he says, I can get 93 miles an hour out of that thing yet. I says, you drove that 93 miles an hour? Yeah, hell, he says, there's nothing wrong with that anymore. But that was really something. Anyway, that was one of the best bearing jobs that I ever pulled off. I had my share of problems up there too. First winter we were there, somewhere along about December we got a snowstorm, and we had snow up to our knees or higher, and so we all had to get involved in snow plowing. And we had one 6x6 with a mounted blade on it, and then we had another 6x6 that had a snowblower, and the snowblower, what it amounted to was a six-cylinder Ford engine mounted up in the front with a blower assembly deal that would, pick it up and blow it over. But anyway, one of the first snowstorms, the old man ordered the motor pool to go in town, open the road up and go to town and get the airmen that stayed in the off-base camp. It was a trailer court. Town had a little trailer court where a number of the guys that had their wives up there were staying. And so it was a case where I got stuck with that job of helping out with the snow plowing, and so I'd take this 6x6 with a plow blade in front, and I start plowing my way into town. And I get into town, and I go right down Main Street and head for the trailer court. And so that's what I did. I got into the trailer court and made a little circle and started back. And about the time I'm pulling out of the trailer court, here's the town sheriff. And he, what in the hell are you doing? And I said, well, get orders to get open up the road for the boys to get into town, in the base. And he says, we don't plow snow here. You drive over it. He says, you plow it and you got nothing but drifts from all of it. He says, all you do is drive over that snow. And it'll pack down, and that's the way we do it here. And just don't let me catch you with that plow around here anymore. That's the way things went up there sometimes. But I found out that's what the way they worked it. You keep driving over the snow, and it keeps packing down, and I guess the plowing is necessary for, in some cases, some to get through some drifts or whatnot on the road. But generally speaking, they just drove over it, and it ended up being a rutty, icy road. But that's what you drove on. You just had to drive slower or whatever, but you wear it down and wear it out, and let the sun and the wind take care of it. And so